Good afternoon. My name is Leslie Warner, and I'll be your host this afternoon for the Tufts Alumni Career Services webinar on Job Search Success Secrets. Before I jump in further, I just want to remind people, as we said in the sign-on login email, we are recording this, so it'll be available later for you to review, or if you need to leave early, you can check it out online to see what you missed. Welcome again. I have been with Alumni Career Services here at Tufts for 16 years, the longest I've been with any one employer or job for very good reasons. But before that, number of years career, I had a lot of job changes, again, mostly for good reasons. And along the way, as a career coach and a job changer myself, I've learned a lot about job search, what works, what helps optimize your search, and I'm going to be speaking to that experience today. Tufts Alumni Career Services, just to introduce what we do briefly, one thing we do is events like this, webinars, so that you can access it wherever you are in the world or online later. For all alumni, all schools, also some in-person events sponsored by Alumni Career Services in Boston and in other cities where there are large numbers of alumni. Second thing we do is fostering networking and connection between alumni and students, and that's again at events and also online. The third thing we offer is individual career coaching services by phone, in person, Skype, and that is for art sciences and engineering and School of the Museum of Fine Arts grads. So today, just a little housekeeping, the program will officially last until about 2:15. I will pause a couple of times for your questions. I'll tell you more about how to do those in a minute. But I will stay on the line and keep things open until 2:30 if there are additional questions and discussion happening. So what you'll see for questions is at either the top or the bottom, usually the bottom of your screen, if you move your cursor around, you'll see these icons pop up. And next to the bubble, the sort of chat bubble, are three dots. If you click on the three dots, you'll see Q&A. What we would love is if you would type in your questions to Q&A, and you can do that anytime. And as I said, I'll pause a couple of times to review the questions that have come in. I'll read them out loud and answer them as we go along. And then again, there'll be more time for more questions at the end. But again, feel free to type away whenever something occurs to you. So we're talking today about job search and our agenda. First, I'll talk briefly about what Howard Figler, a writer a few years back, calls the no-search job search. Then preparation for your immediate job search, 4 main job search methods, and tips for an effective search, trends to watch out for or be prepared for, and additional resources. So, 2 job search approaches in effect that Howard Figler, as I said, this author. He talks about the no-search job search. Those are the things that you do now and in an ongoing way, and the payoff is really longer term, usually. Meaning, and you'll see more when I describe what I'm saying, you do these things now and they help you with job security in the sense not that you necessarily keep the exact job that you have, but you'll be positioned for opportunities to come to you. Short-term job search strategies, that's what we'll spend most of our time on. That's what you're doing right now to find opportunities, respond to job ads, go beyond the job ads, and get those job opportunities. So briefly, the no-search job search, 3 principles: positioning. Be connected to the area and the people that you'd like to work with. That might be through networking, that might be through other activities. We'll talk about that. Your timing, preferably long before you actually need a new job. The third principle, authenticity, means, well, for example, you could find out that the CEO of your dream target company loves a charity that supports elephants in Africa. And you could go to their annual fundraiser for the charity that supports Africa. And guess who you're going to find at that event? A lot of middle and senior managers, right, of that target company, because it's the dream preferred charity of the CEO. But if you don't care at all about those elephants, that's not very authentic, right? You can certainly go and meet some people, but we're suggesting that you do activities that you actually have some interest or connection to, in addition to having a connection to the CEO of where you'd like to work. So again, details on how to do this: be active in your profession or the one you're interested in. Now, sometimes that can be a little delicate with confidentiality, concerns, but to the extent that you can. Active means showing up at professional association, industry association meetings. It means going beyond showing up, joining a committee, chairing a committee, eventually being in the leadership or the board of the professional association. Again, a great way to be visible and contributing and build that reputation in your field. Volunteering, that might be volunteering in a sector or a type of organization that directly connects you to the people and type of work you'd like to do. Doing your current job well. Okay, that is a given, but it's necessary but not enough. If you just do your current job well and quietly sit there and no one knows about it, that won't work as well for this. This is partly about visibility, doing your current job well and making sure that's reflected, again, in your professional activities, in your LinkedIn. Writing and speaking about your work. Again, great way to be visible. And contributing to your field and being known and getting to know people. Now, that can feel a little intimidating. Maybe you feel that where you're at in your career or your particular style, you don't feel you have those skills or that expertise. Well, you can always interview someone else who is an expert, right? For a local newsletter article. They're always looking for content, right? For your profession or your industry. You can help set up a panel of experts to speak about your career or your field. Community work, that might be a little different from volunteering. It might be just doing work in your community that you care about that isn't in any way connected to your professional goal, but it does make you visible as a contributing good person. So again, sometimes these things, particularly being very active in your professional association, joining that committee, helping plan the conference is one of my favorites. They always need volunteers to do that in many fields. Sometimes there can be a short-term, immediate payoff. You meet people through that work in the professional association, and a month later you get a referral, get a lead, and get that job that you need. But more often the payoff does build over time. You build the relationships and the visibility over time. Now, your immediate, what I call your short-term job search, and what I'm going to focus on the rest of the time, meaning you're doing it right now and your hope is, and your plan is to get a job reasonably quickly. It's not necessarily about building relationships over 2 years, although again, you may be doing that concurrently. The first thing, and I would say I'm going to talk about the common mistakes that people make. There really is a top 10. And one of the top 10 common mistakes that I see is people not doing the preparation, not preparing to organize their systems, their space, and their sort of emotional and SWAT team supports to really support a search. People often just jump in and start responding to ads because the ads, and we'll talk about this more later, the ads are very seductive. The ads are very seductive, and it seems like that's what you should be doing for your job search. And yes, responding to ads is one job search tactic among others, but take a little time to do the preparation. Set up your systems for information, for tracking what you're doing. So you got what I call a sacred space for your job search that's not the dining room table, so it doesn't have to be cleared off every night, if possible, if you're able to do that. Speak to your friends and colleagues about how they can specifically support you. Again, to the extent that you can be open about your search. This is especially important in a full-time search. Many people say that a full-time job search when you're unemployed or in transition, as we say, is the hardest job they've ever done, and one of the hardest things they've ever done. So, who's that friend that you can count on for emotional support to give you a lift when you're having a tough day? Who's that friend that's really good at tactical support? Where can I find this? Where can I get this information? Who should I ask about this? Maybe somebody that's really good at job search themselves, really experienced and good at it, or maybe they're a manager in your field, so it could give you good feedback on a resume. A job search success team is a very specific kind of model for accountability, not to be therapy or anything, but you meet with one or two or three people once a week, either live in person or live on the phone, and you each have a list of the tasks and activities that each person has committed to do during the week, and you go through person number one, go down their list one at a time, and if they weren't able to do the task or complete it, you brainstorm ways to help support them in that. Or maybe they switched gears for a good reason, and that's fine too. But accountability and holding yourself to your commitments and your tasks is very hard for a lot of folks. There's a lot of goal slippage. If you're working full time, you're busy with other things, or if you're doing a full-time search, again, it's just hard to work alone and maintain motivation and productivity, especially when some of the tasks you need to do seem easier, like clicking send on a job ad and sending your resume out can feel easier than some of the other tasks that are really important. So I have more information that I'll include in a follow-up email about job search success teams, which again, it could be just one person. Being your own project manager. Another way people frame it is to be their own manager. Again, view it as a job. Even if you're doing it on the side and you're working full time, it's still a job. Be a compassionate, kind, but very firm boss. Commit to specific actions that are going to happen in your calendar at specific times each week. And it may be different each week, right? Especially if you're working full time. But it's not just work on the job search Saturday morning. No, it's what specific time from 10 to 12, from 11 to 1 on Saturday, and which action items are you going to do? And then check in with your boss once a week. How did you do? How did you do in completing the tasks? How did you do in the quality of the work you did? How did you do? And some people give themselves numerical grades. That would not work for me, 0 to 100. It might work for you, but definitely an honest conversation with your boss, yourself, about what's going well specifically and where you might need help or resource or a reset button. Very, very common that people don't do this. They're too busy in action, doing and doing and doing, but it really does pay to take a few minutes each week to plan and to review how things went. More preparation. The public statement is important for all of us. That is the answer to why do you want to leave your job, or why did you leave your last job if you've already left, especially after a layoff or any type of situation where the job ended with any sort of just not completely under your steam. But if it is under your steam and your direction, but you left and now you're in transition, you still need to have a good, solid answer for this. Brief, honest, but carefully scripted and edited. What I always say is it's your laundry, it's your stuff, but you pick. If you can imagine, you're hanging laundry out on the line to dry, right? A little old school, but you pick what's ready to hang out on the line. You pick what you're going to show. It's your information. So you want to keep it sort of 50,000 foot airplane view. Business reasons. My department, along with many others, was affected by a downturn in revenue over the last several quarters. We've had increased competition. And my department, along with others, was affected, and the headcount was reduced by 40%, right? If it's true. If you can put it in broad terms and then you say, yeah, here's the situation, my department and my role was affected, and now I'm looking for right? So, and you want to be prepared even for the people you run into at the post office, especially, again, if you're not working full time and you were before, you're going to run into people around town and you need to be ready, and you don't want to lie or deflect, because you never know who might have a job lead or a resource or someone to introduce you to, right? Again, common issue is people like hide out and try to avoid those conversations, or another common mistake is a little bit of oversharing, particularly if it was an emotional or complicated situation that maybe you don't aren't happy about how management handled it or how the company handled things. Share those emotions and that situation in agonizing detail with a very, very small circle. Close friends who you can trust to not blab, and close family members who, again, are going to keep it private, keep it tight. Anything outside of that close circle gets the public statement. And that takes real discipline, but it really will help you to not be bad mouthing the employer. However, much some of them may deserve it for some of their actions or decisions. You share that privately and in a small group, small number of people, and you be ready. A quick story about the value of sharing some version of your situation, more widely and freely, is a true story that happened to a colleague of mine. Her client was a senior HR manager, and there was an economic downturn. She was laid off along with a lot of other folks, and she'd been working since she was 15. She was now 40. She was really embarrassed, uncomfortable. She was kind of hiding out at home, working on her job search. Well, the oil truck delivery man came. And those of you that have oil, they have to get out of the truck. They plug it into the wall with the big hose. And she was out in the garden doing some weeding. And he said, "Oh, Ms. So-and-so, what are you doing here? Why aren't you over at your big fancy job?" And because he had gotten to know her a bit over the years, and she tried to deflect. And he said, "No, really, tell me what's going on." So she told him, and he said, "Well, you give me your resume. You put it in my truck, because who knows? Where do you want to work anyway? What do you want to do?" And she told him about a couple of the companies she was interested in. And he said, "My daughter is the head of HR at one of those companies." Um, Long story short, she put the resume, gave it to him. He took it in his truck, drove over to his daughter's house. And within a couple of days, she'd gotten a call from the HR manager, and she did end up working there. And one reason I love stories like that is it again reinforces how it's important to have your information ready, have your story comfortable and clear and simple, not going into the gory details when it's not appropriate, but also not avoiding telling people your situation and not making prejudgments about who can be helpful and who can't. You just never know. Another similar story about a man who was on the ferry to Martha's Vineyard. Again, happened to a colleague of mine, his client, and he didn't want to talk about why he was on the ferry at a different time or a different day. But the ferry, not the captain, but one of the staff guys on the ferry, again, knew the people. He knew the regulars really well, and he wormed out of him what he wanted to do, and said, "Hey, you should talk to Jane over there. She works at one of those companies." And again, so it was the ferryman who made the connection, and that's where the next job came from. Now, most of us are going to have a lot of other conversations and activities that we do, and it's not going to happen with our oil truck driver or the ferryman, but it could. So you want to be ready to tell that story. Self-assessment, another step many people skip. If you really know your skills and goals and you can articulate those skills clearly in the language that's relevant and fits for your target companies, great. But it's still good to take a few minutes to double check, well, what are my criteria right now? What are my goals and needs? Are there different skills that I want to emphasize or really highlight? What's my strongest, what we call your value proposition? How do you add value to a particular employer, a particular sector? What problems are you best at solving? So it pays to take a little time on this. It really helps you focus your search and get more of what you want. Research. Also a step people often either skip or they put off, thinking, "Oh, I'll research the company when I have an interview." And yes, you certainly can, especially if you're hooked into, how to get what we call the full text articles in trade and business journals, the ones that specialize in a specific industry or a specific sector, as well as broader places like Wall Street Journal or New York Times. But it's helpful to start doing this research now before you're applying, because you can get ideas of good problems, good challenges out there that you can work on, industries, specific companies. You can access these library databases at many public libraries. Spend 2 minutes with your reference librarian, and they will tell you which database has the full text trade and business press articles. Or if you're in a scientific area with academic research, you need academic journal databases, which are different ones. And Tufts Online Community, which is the alumni database, also has some resources, password protected, and you sign up at alumniandfriends.tufts.edu if you haven't already. And then they have a couple of Tisch library databases that you can access as alumni as well. So I hope I'm making a good case for taking some time to do some preparation and some research. A little more homework that I'm suggesting. Again, many people do not do this. Everyone that I've worked with who has done it has felt really, really appreciated the benefits. Think about what your ideal type of target job would be. What are the criteria that would make it best for you? Not that you're going to get all of this perfect fit stuff in your next job, but it's worth thinking about what they are, especially for when you're communicating and networking, as well as evaluating potential offers. Specific type of company, location, commute, right? It's not enough to just say less than an hour. I mean, how do you feel about being parked on 128 South, right? It's not a happy place, but if you're like me, you put on an Audible book and can really reframe it, or maybe you need to be close to the daycare center or whatever the location issues are for you. Management style, company culture. Next to each of these things on your list, write a little bit to define it. What would it look like at its best for you, to the extent that you know? Don't worry about what may or may not be possible. Sometimes I have particularly recent grads who say they want to work somewhere, a company with a lot of young people, that they can have friends at work. And I always tease them a bit, saying, well, they watch too much TV, too many television shows about places like that. But the thing that's more realistic is, think about the culture you would like, but also think, how does that preference for a company full of fun young people to be friends with, how does that rank with other things on here, right? What skills you get to use, the opportunity to learn, the compensation, the benefits, the problems you love to solve, right? And next to each of these criteria for you, give it a number from 1 to 10, which is a weighting, not a ranking. So you could have a couple of number 10s, a couple of number 8s, but it's not a precise science, but it's to help you clarify and get that swirling stuff out of your head and onto paper and thinking about what's important to you, which things are more important, and what kind of trade-offs you might be willing to make. And this document will evolve over time. While you're in your search, you may change it, you may revise it, but write it up and print it out and put it up on the wall or someplace. Definitely not just hidden away in a computer file. You want it to be where you can see it and refer to it. This is what you're going for. This is your mission, right? Oh, and I just wanted to say one more quick thing on this slide. Your additional criteria, right? Maybe a certain kind of culture that's very family friendly with flex time and telecommute and is important to you. Maybe a culture where there's a lot of company-sponsored volunteerism and community work and community connection. Whatever has meaning for you, you write it down and define it. Next, that was your ideal job. Now we're looking at companies. You're going to start a list of about 25 companies, organizations, if it's a nonprofit or a government entity, again, just substitute the word organization, that meet your criteria as best as you know at the time. So if you're just starting your research, maybe you know some of them by reputation. Maybe you go online to top 25 PR agencies in New York. By the way, top usually in lists like that is a reference to size or sales, some number, and it's not about reputation or happy workers, although you can find happy worker lists too. And then you're looking to add to the list and to refine it with your research. Some of it is talking to humans, right? When you're networking, when you're talking to a Tufts alum or someone who's already in your network, here are some of the companies I'm targeting. Here's why, some of my criteria, and what other startups working in the battery power space should I be looking at? What else are you aware of? And you'll add them to your list. Now, little warning, if you are in the small company space, you need to add more companies, right? Because it's not just how big is their department that you want to get into. It needs to be a large enough enterprise that they might have needs, right, in the short term. So that's why when it's a small list of small organizations, less than 200 people, you need to have more of them on your list. So why? Why am I spending so much time on target company, target job lists? Well, you are a one-person marketing and sales company right now in your job search. And that helps explain the drain or the frustration or the feelings that you feel sometimes, because most of us don't want to be a one-person marketing and sales company. And if we do, we definitely don't want to have ourselves be the product, right? But when you have these lists, you're helping focus your time, energy, and effort. It can make your job search, it will make it much more effective. It also helps you do what I had a young alum on one of these seminars who said, "You've totally shifted my paradigm." And he meant, which is great, from reactive to proactive, and to get into this sense of I am, this is a marketing task. Understanding who needs me, what the needs are out there, and then how I can connect with them. You really increase your chances of getting a job that fits you, at least in more of your criteria. And there's always something to do when you have your lists guiding you, right? It's not just reacting to job ads. So hopefully I've convinced you a bit on that. Now, before I jump into the marketing documents, I'm just going to check and see if there are, no, I don't see questions yet, but that's okay. We'll have time for more later. But as I said, hopefully if you have lots of experience with job searches or out in the working world, this may sound familiar. It may be a refresher or a reminder. Perhaps you'll get a new pointer or two. But if you haven't done a job search in a while, or you're a recent grad, I'm hoping I can really give you some good strategies to make it more efficient and to build your confidence that this is something you can do. It can be learned. None of us is born knowing how to market ourselves or how to do all of these different things, and how to have this framework of, it really is about what are their challenges and needs in the different industries, the different companies, the different employers, and how can you then communicate about how you're going to meet the challenges and needs. And you think about this when you're preparing your resume and cover letter, because the job ad, it's this artificial construct. It's a thing that somebody writes, hopefully with good clues about what's going on at the department level, at the company, the individual area where you'd be working. But it's a way to attract people into a conversation to see, okay, here's our problems, challenges, and needs. Are you the person that can solve them or can meet the need, right? It's about a business need or challenge or set of them. This job description is a set of things written down to try to help them get that person or people to meet that need. So your resume is going to focus on that target industry, target job function. You're going to have several different formats that you may need: Microsoft Word, PDF. You might need a text only. If this is less common now, but you see what's common in your industry. A few years back, a lot of you know you'd often have to cut and paste text into a box online. Now more of the systems, the resume applicant systems, are accepting PDFs or formatted documents. You need a print resume that looks nice, right? Because you'll bring extra copies of it to a networking meeting or a job interview. Visual resume it depends. It can mean a couple of different things. One type of visual resume is an actual online resume, where it's a web page, and everything on it can be a link, can be an image. In certain kinds of media-related fields, you definitely need to do that. You might also need a personal website. Again, not all of us need that, but see what's common or expected in your industry. Of course, technical folks need an online portfolio of work samples, project samples. Other and visual media folks do too. But another type of visual resume is, you may have seen it, just looks kind of jazzier and fancy, a little bit fancy, a little bit jazzy. It's not just linear text going across the line. Just be sure that you pay attention to what's expected and what's common in your industry. And you can find that with looking at samples online, but also by talking to people in your target industry. The cover letter, you customize for every job. When you've researched the company and the industry to help you focus on their business challenges, that will really help you make it pop out. You want to respond to what they say in the job ad, but also, lift it. And I have be presenting in the fall the cover letter webinar again, where you want to lift it above, again, just a rote response to their key points. It needs to speak in a personal voice. Again, still appropriate to the industry. I had one young woman, new grad, who was drafted a letter for a PR assistant she had 5 exclamation points in her letter, her cover letter. I convinced her pretty quickly that was way more, even for PR. You can't be that enthusiastic. I think she ended up with 1 appropriately placed exclamation point. But, for many industries, you might feel 0 is the right number of exclamation points, but you still need to find a personal voice that's not just listing what's on your resume. You're going to prepare marketing presentations. I call them marketing presentations, but they're conversations, right? It'll be for networking situations. You need to really prepare your introduction, that answers who are you, what are you best at. Another way of thinking about introductions is, who do you help and what do you help them with? I help Tufts alumni manage their careers, right? Is one way to think about what I do, as opposed to job titles. I'm a financial analyst, thud. I help, but what financial analysts help different people with different things, right? Depending if they're internal focus or client focus. What do you need them to know about you now, the person that you're talking to? For interviews, it'll be framed as, tell me about yourself. They may or may not say it in those exact words, but it might be 90 seconds to 2 minutes that you shape. Again, lots of good information in articles online and interview books on how to create your tell me about yourself. It's not restating the resume. It's really picking out the key things, key skills, key accomplishments, and experience that you have that's the most important for them right now in terms of you addressing the key challenge. And then you prepare interview stories, challenge action results, or problem action results, or situation or task actions results. Write it down first and then practice saying it out loud. And that's true with the introductions too. Another very, very common mistake in preparing for interviews is people thinking and even writing notes, but not practicing saying it out loud. It's an out loud thing, so you do have to say it out loud. Don't memorize like a robot, but make sure you know your key points and prepare anticipated question. Why did you switch from basket weaving to being an attorney? Why didn't you complete the graduate degree? And some interviewers, you can anticipate, will go 15 years back in your history and ask about some change or transition or thing that you did back then. So just be ready to speak to it. Prepare references. We're doing a lot of preparation here, aren't we? Yeah. And I promise you would be so grateful that you did this. This is another very commonly skipped or postponed step. But if you wait to check in with your references until someone is asking for references, maybe it's hard to get in touch with them. Maybe you send them an email, but you don't hear anything back. It could just mean they're on a short vacation. But if you speak to each reference, hopefully by phone or in person, you are able to really honestly discuss, what are they ready to say about strengths and a possible weakness for this specific job, so they can help position you as best they can. I actually went a little overboard on this one time, and I had a very helpful boss who really wanted to help position me. And so I told her some exact wording from the job ad, and she then used their exact words to frame some of my skills and accomplishments. And the boss, I did get the job offer, but the boss actually kind of twinkled and smiled at me. He kidded me a little about my da, 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 da. He quoted her back, quoting him. Anyway, I'm not describing it very well, but it was clear that he knew that she was quoting his words, which I had shared with her. So yes, they do want to focus it to the specific job, but perhaps not quoting the boss back at him. You want to type up, of course, your reference contact sheet, but don't share it until you're asked, right? It's super helpful if you're able to prep the references after you've had an interview or two so that you have more information to give them about the challenges that they're facing. Again, a lot of people put this off, and then it's stressful. Especially if it's a former supervisor that maybe you haven't spoken to in a while, that can feel awkward. It's great to get this out of the way. Don't put it off. So now we actually get to the job search methods, right? You thought I'd never get there with so much preparation. And when I have a big room full of folks and a lot of time, I like to do a poll of the room. I won't do a poll today, but it's helpful if people haven't read a lot of articles about job search methods, if they haven't really been exposed to this stuff before. It's really interesting to see what people think. People tend to overestimate how effective responding to job ads is. It's not that it has zero effectiveness. There are all kinds of polls and surveys that go out in a variety, talking to people at all different job levels, and it can vary from job type and job level, but the general trend is that the actual effectiveness of responding to job ads is 20 to 30% of job seekers. And people tend to overestimate that, again, because the ads are so easy to find now. They're all over the place. Targeted mailing, that is when you write to a manager who is not advertising for you and tell them, here's what I can do for you. Do you need somebody who can improve quality in your factory, in your manufacturing plant? Here's my background. Here's what I can bring. I will call you next week. It's about 5%, right? It's you're targeting, these people might be able to use your help, but you don't know if they have the money, if they have the resource, or how hot that need is. That is underutilized. So I'll talk more about that and why and how to do that. Recruiters, search firms, headhunters, that widely varies. It depends on your sector and whether your job level and type of work, whether the employers feel they need to pay, right? Because it costs them money to hire an outside search firm headhunter. So for me, working primarily in higher ed and nonprofits, and when I was in corporate world, I was in corporate outplacement, where the consultant career coach jobs were filled 100% through referral and networking. Zero advertising, zero headhunters. So my number there is zero. And in many industries and areas that may be the case, but for you, with a technical skill or a skill that's in demand, might be 20%, might be 15%. So it's definitely something to consider as one of your methods. Networking. People either underestimate it, or even if they have an accurate number for how effective it is as a job search method, it's underutilized, right? Responding to surveys, the information is 70 to 80%. And the reason is it's often combined with other things. So for example, if you're responding to a job ad and your resume and cover letter may go into that, what I used to call the database in the sky, which now is in the cloud usually, right, in some form. So it really is in the sky. It goes into that database or is in a big stack, either metaphorically or physically, and it may not even get read. But if you're networking and talking to people who work in that company, preferably in that department, for feedback, for advice. If you've already had that contact developed and now you just reactivate it a little bit, you have a good chance of getting your resume pulled out of the stack or put into an employee referral track. Some companies hire as many as 50% of their new staff through employee referral, which, has pros and cons to it from both sides. Or through that networking referral process, you're in the loop and hearing about this job need before it's even advertised, right? So that's why that number is so high, is that sometimes it's combined with other things like responding to a job ad. So why do I harp on this and spend so much time on it? Well, the reason is you want to ideally apportion your time according to the effectiveness of the job search method for you. And I'll say that again, your time and energy should be put into the job search methods that are effective for you, which means, yes, you're going to respond to job ads, but you budget your time for that, and you budget your time for the networking, and you perhaps add targeted mailing to your list if there's a great employer that you're having trouble getting networked into, or they're not advertising for you, right? And you check out search firms and headhunters to see if they're going to be a resource for you at your level in your type of field. But you definitely concentrate more energy and more time than most people do on the networking, right? And it does take discipline because, again, what's easier? If you have your resume all prepared, and on LinkedIn, right, they have a feature, I'm pretty sure it's still active, where you can just click apply for this job. And some companies will let you apply just by sending your LinkedIn profile, no cover letter, no resume. And that can feel very nice, right? It's fast, it's easy, boom. The problem with that fastness and easiness is then you're not doing things like researching to see on LinkedIn which Tufts alums are there that are strategically positioned in the right companies for you, the right job function areas for you. Are there ones you already know? Great. Are there ones you don't know but went to Tufts or went to your graduate school? And you can reach out, you can start developing that relationship, right? It's ideal. I mean, you can also try to find contacts or Tufts alums in a company that you're actively sending a resume and cover letter in. You definitely can. It's just sometimes the timing is tough, right? If that great person is on vacation or not available in that exact week, maybe they'll be available later. Maybe you can still connect up with them while you're in the interview loop. But so that's why I'm saying that the common mistake is doing what's easy or what's right there and obvious, which is the job ads for some of us, and not really disciplining and working to develop these other strategies, in particular the networking, which is, it, as you say, it can get you in the employee referral bucket instead of that big database in the sky. It can get you information and feedback and advice that isn't available anywhere else. You can get information about trends and needs and what's happening in that department or that industry or that area that isn't published or isn't easy to find in any other way. And in best case, you get referrals to job leads, either within that company or other ones. You get referrals to the right person. You get those ideas of, oh, go check out these 3 companies. We're not hiring right now, but check out these 3 folks that might be. I had one person in my office yesterday. This is another great story. He said he was talking about what he wanted to do and wanted to relocate to LA. And a friend of his who's in LA says, wow, here's this cool startup, and I don't know exactly what's going on, but I know they just leased this building across the street, and I can see the signs going up, and I can see them starting to move in. So with a startup, if they're leasing new space, that's usually a positive sign that some growth and good things are happening. So again, and his friend actually knows somebody who works there. We'll find out how close it is to what my client wants to do. So now let me check for questions. I don't see more questions yet. And that's okay. But hopefully before I jump into more specifics on the methods, hopefully I've been persuasive here about how easy it is to have sort of slippage and spend too much time responding to ads and not enough time combining it with leveraging it with networking and also doing, exploratory networking into companies that are on your target list um, that perhaps aren't advertising yet, right? So now into the specifics, responding to ads, it depends on sort of where you are in your career, how your skills are valued and viewed in the marketplace, how much your interest area, skill area is expanding or in demand, your geographic location. You may find lots of jobs online. On LinkedIn, the Career Services website has an app called Handshake. It's focused most towards it's for art sciences and engineering, School of the Museum of Fine Arts. A lot of the jobs on Handshake are for recent grads, but some are for more experienced folks. And, if a company is hiring a lot of recent grads, they may have other needs as well, right? For you with developed expertise. And they have a relationship of some kind with Tufts and some history of hiring there, which is great. What's also great is to find really niche posting sites, like, say, a group on LinkedIn that's only for people with a very specific skill set or job function, or professional association websites that are, again, very targeted, like American Society for Training and Development. I mean, that's pretty targeted. Some are even more so. So you may find lots of jobs online, or you may not see a lot of jobs advertised that fit your skills, your targets, your geography. If you do find a lot of jobs online, great, but you remember that's you being driven by these external factors. Who's posting? What's above the waterline? If you think of an iceberg, the job market as an iceberg, a lot of that iceberg is below the waterline. The need hasn't been published yet, or the need will never be a published job ad, like my old industry of the outplacement industry, where they were never advertised anywhere, all filled through relationship and referral. Or they may just be that the manager hasn't quite articulated or defined what the need is yet, right? So there's a lot that's out there that isn't advertised, and some of it will never be advertised. So even if you are seeing job ads in your field, really go back to your job criteria list and think, are these opportunities likely to meet my top criteria? And be sure to carve out some time for the companies that aren't advertising, but that really might be a better location or a better culture or more interesting to you for whatever your criteria are, right? And you view the ads partly as research, kind of indicators, what's happening. So even if there are ads, as I say, at a different level or in a different job function, if there's activity, it could be an indicator for you. So again, don't spend too much time just doing that. You're going to do that vivid, personal voice cover letter. You're going to follow their instructions to the letter, and then look for additional ways to stand out. I've known people who have, in addition to the cover letter and resume going into the database in the sky, have written directly to who they think is the hiring manager. Now, some ads are very transparent, reporting to the chief of blah, blah, blah department, right? Or the executive director of blah, blah. Sometimes they're very specific, and you can go on LinkedIn and figure out who that person is. Other times you're kind of guessing, but you can write directly to that hiring manager and say, I submitted my cover letter and resume online for the such and such role, and I wanted to write to you directly because I really believe I'm an excellent match and could contribute to your department. And then the rest of it is the same cover letter, right? What's the worst that can happen? They don't read it or they don't see it. Talk to people. Yeah, and again, networking, talking to people, either you already have the relationship or you try to develop the relationships, right? in for advice, feedback. That helps you get information that might help you really shine, really differentiate yourself with your knowledge of what's going on. Now, showing up in person, like you've already applied online, you show up in person with a paper copy of your resume and cover letter. That's not always possible or appropriate, right? If there's a big, tall building where they control access and you don't have an appointment, that's not as easy as it used to be. And it's not always appropriate culturally. But smaller organization, more casual, smaller building, um, consider that as an option. I've known people who've had success that way. You say, does someone have 5 minutes so I could put a face to and paste to the name? That would be super helpful. Maybe they say no, right? Following up after you apply. Other strategies people have used is apply online through the HR app or the database in the sky, and then look for someone to connect with on LinkedIn to specifically apply. This is not for networking. This is the pitch, the application. Maybe it's a company where you can tell exactly who the recruiter is for what you want to do. Maybe it's a company where you can get at least an idea or a good guess, reasonable guess of who the hiring manager is. And again, reach out directly on LinkedIn. I've applied for the such and such role. Would welcome the opportunity to chat with you about it. It's great and it's a brief message that you can send on LinkedIn, but or request to connect. It's great if you can add something in that little message about the ideas that you have for them, right? The solutions that you have for them, other than just, I want to talk. But again, I've seen people succeed with reaching out to the recruiter, with reaching out to the hiring manager. Worth a try. Targeted mailing, I mentioned that briefly. This is an underutilized strategy, partly because it's hard to do well, right? You need to really research, really know what's the problem or the challenge that they might be facing. And how do you know that? Is it from your research? Is it from knowing people inside the organization? And you write a pitch to what one writer calls the pain point. Not everything, just a few key points about what their problem or challenge might be and how you can help using examples from your past. And then you send it to the person who you think, based on your research, might have the problem and have the budget or resources to commit to it. And then you call and ask for a meeting. Again, being ready with how you can add value, how you can improve the sales or improve the merchandising or increase the volunteer retention, whatever it is that you wanted, that they need done. It takes guts, but again, what's the worst that can happen? They don't respond or they don't answer, or sometimes people get a phone call and it doesn't lead to hiring, but it might lead to something else. Maybe a referral, maybe a relationship that develops over time, maybe some work down the line. So here's the quick note on if you have your ideal job, the ideal dream company. You would love to work there. Just you don't put 100% of your effort into this one company, but you could budget 5% of your effort, 10%, some percentage that you can tolerate to focus on one company, and you're going to talk to customers, competitors, vendors, suppliers, former employees. Former employees are great, right? Sometimes they'll be more honest than current employees about the challenges and rewards. And then you're going to make a pitch to, again, a target marketing pitch, but it's very carefully written and showing that you've done your homework to understand some of their challenges and needs. And you pitch for being, at least contribute to the solution. And again, I've seen people do this well. It takes time. It's not an immediate strategy, but it's certainly something you could plug away at if there's one or two companies that are your dream job. Quick true story, a guy and this wasn't my client, but I read about him in an article where his dream was to work at the Motley Fool. This is a few years back. Now there's much more interesting and diverse, voices about finances and investing online. But, 15, 20 years ago, there weren't a lot of that kind of thing out there. And Motley Fool really was different because it was funny, it was witty, it was clever, and it had solid financial advice and resources. And so he started doing his research. He started talking to people. He wasn't a famous or brilliant writer. He wasn't a software person. He wasn't a financial advisor. So it took him time to really figure out, well, what was his value proposition going to be? But it is still a business, right? It's a business that has a number of things that it needed to do, not just write great content and have financial advice. There were other parts and pieces, and he eventually did make his pitch. And part of his pitch was to the manager he wanted to work for. Part of it was that he had really figured out how he was going to help them with certain kinds of partnerships that they were working on, and he did it in their voice, fitting their culture, which he loved and had immersed himself in. And he did get hired, but again, that took him over a year to do the whole thing. But I just tell that story to say there is hope, even if you're not sure. What do I know enough? Well, if you don't know enough, take time and learn it if it's really your dream ideal place. But most of us need to also put energy into the regular job search where we hope to meet some or more of our needs, if not be in the dream or the ideal right away. Recruiters and search firms, briefly mentioned them. Again, for some of us, it's zero because they're outside recruiters, third party, they're paid by the company. Another thing I sometimes do a quiz or a poll on of a room if I have time is asking people how much they think recruiters get paid. And people aren't allowed to answer if they actually know from being in on that on the business side. It can be 20 to 30% of your first year's wages, right? Your first year's salary. So that's a lot. Why do the companies do it? They do it if they believe it can save them time and money. Or give them access to candidates, for example, passive candidates who aren't actively searching, maybe, that are harder to find. But it can be an excellent source of really good industry and salary feedback and info. You're going to be upfront with them. They'll ask you your geography, your salary range, and you want to be honest with them, but you can also ask them for feedback. And they may have relationships into companies that you're not networked into or connected to. Be sure you remember who they work for, that they are not going to work your search to your goals. Ideally, they'll treat all parts of the transaction, the company and you, with good integrity and good intention, but still the bottom line is they're not trying to help you build your career, right? That's not their ultimate goal of their business. Now, the reason why same job, same industry experience is a con is if you're doing a little bit of a career pivot, if you're doing a big career pivot, forget it. The recruiters will probably not be a resource for you. It doesn't mean you can't get a job. It just means they get paid to find same job title, same industry experience, competitor's name at the top of the resume, right? That's what they get paid to find, typically. Sometimes they claim to be well connected and may not be. How can you check that? Well, ask them for specific examples of people they've placed in your target industry, target companies. Ask them for referrals. The great way to find a good recruiter is to get referred to one by somebody who's used them. Ideal is what I call follow the money, where you get a referral from a hiring manager who paid the recruiter to find them staff. But if it's a peer who was placed by the recruiter and felt, treated professionally and ethically, that's great too. Just be careful to make sure you talk explicitly with the recruiter for them not to send your resume anywhere, even on spec, without your explicit permission, because you don't want to be networking into one company and the recruiter is sending your resume in at the exact same time. It puts the company in a bind, and sometimes they respond to that bind by throwing you out, basically. But you don't, if you communicate clearly with the recruiter, and that's not a problem. So we talked about this, the ground rules, and being honest with them. This is not game playing. They're your business partner in this. Now, networking, we talked about the jobs not being advertised. We talked about that you can really learn information that's not available elsewhere. You can test out your value proposition, get feedback on it. You also get practice telling your stories, practice presenting your background. And people hire people, not resumes or LinkedIn profiles. Some resources for networking. I also do a webinar on networking where I talk more in detail about it, but there are lots of great resources, books, articles. These are resources. There's a Tufts networking group on LinkedIn. Those are people that have signed up. Those are alumni mostly, who've signed up. Some are students, and they've signed up to, respond, help each other with career questions. The Tufts online community, they haven't necessarily signed up to respond or do anything specific, but you can get direct emails that way, which is very helpful for contacting people, right? And another quick tip for contacting people directly, let's say it's an alum and they don't respond to your LinkedIn request for an informational, a conversation for advice and feedback about their company or their job or career history. You can look on the online community, see if there's a direct email there. We have resources on our website with sample emails if you haven't done this type of networking before. And then the other way to get a direct email is a website called hunter.io. And you put in the URL of the company or organization, and then it tells you the email protocol, tufts.edu, and then it tells you first name dot last name at tufts.edu. And again, just not to forget the dog walkers, the community groups, the people that aren't necessarily, strategically placed in your industry, but still have contacts. You don't know everybody that they know and could introduce you to, like our friend in the oil truck. So I want to check for, I have some information here about networking informational interviews, but I want to check for questions. Okay, one question says, how to network in an authentic way when you want a job at a company? And she asks then, does it come off as dishonest? I don't see how it could be. It's just my view. I don't think it can be dishonest when you do want to work with them. I think if I'm reading between the lines, if I'm understanding your question, it's about I think you mean if you're asking for a networking meeting, but what you really want is to work there, right? Then what you say is, I'd love to meet with you or talk with you, learn more about the company, because I'm exploring new options. I'm exploring, next steps for my career, right? You be transparent. You're not saying, can you get me a job at your company? You're saying, I'd love to hear about your experience at your company because I think it's a place I'd like to be. Hopefully that helps. As you're absolutely right. Authenticity is really helpful. And also differentiating between what the meeting is. Are you asking for a networking meeting, for information, advice, feedback, that kind of thing? Or are you asking to meet with this person to make a pitch and present yourself to try to work there, right? The target marketing is saying, I want to work for you. Can we meet so I can talk about your challenges and how I might be able to help, right? That's a job interview, pitch meeting. Whereas asking, can I meet with you to learn more about your company and your challenges you're facing, I think I'd like to work there, right? So you're absolutely right that you want to differentiate between a research, exploration, building relationship meeting and a pitch meeting. Thank you for that question. Here's a great question. Do you have a sense of how to sell all the skills I've gotten from a PhD on a resume? Project management, problem solving, collaboration. I'm trying to shift to the nonprofit industry. Would I list this as a job or an experience section? Okay, that is an excellent question, but it's hard to answer in this format in terms of the specifics of you. The short answer I can give is it depends. We have a resource on our website. Is it called Virtual PhD or My PhD? Something like that. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name. And it's explicitly designed for helping PhDs transition into something that isn't teaching and research at a university, right? And it includes all kinds of sectors that they might be transitioning to in industry or nonprofit or government. So there's some great resources online. Again, if you've completed the PhD in the past, someplace other than Tufts, see what resources they have available for career coaching, career services. Use the Tufts resources of whatever school or schools you attended at Tufts, because it's very situation specific. For example, I've worked with one PhD who some of the research work that she did actually had project components that were the content was directly relevant to some of the nonprofits she was applying to, if I'm explaining that right. So sometimes the content of what you did might be relevant. Sometimes it's more the skills you used, as you're saying, the process. So you might be using a more functional resume that's emphasizing the functions and the skills that you did, and then lists the work history at the bottom. It's really it depends. But look at online resources, look at our website, and use use the career services of your schools, because it really does depend. Oh, here's a great so thank you. Here's a great question: LinkedIn versus LinkedIn Premium. Thank you. Most of us can get along just great with LinkedIn Regular. However, if you are trying to launch an entrepreneurial venture or sell yourself as a consultant, or in a full-time job search where you are finding it challenging to get to see all the profiles you want to see, and you would find it helpful to have the messaging component of LinkedIn Premium, then you might try LinkedIn Premium, or any job seeker. You can try it. I think it's 1 month for free. At least it has been in the past. Try it for a month. Definitely watch your calendar, because it is expensive. It isn't necessary for everybody. Definitely. But if you were an entrepreneur building a business as a consultant, I would say yes. Current tips. Okay, great. Another great question. Where can I find current tips to optimize my LinkedIn profile? There are certainly some resources on our website where, if you're just getting started, there are more sort of beginner level tips. If you've already been using LinkedIn and you want some more advanced stuff, I'll look for some resources and articles that are recent to put in a follow-up email, but I can say jobhunt.org has job-hunt.org has excellent career coaches who write articles in different topic areas. I've found them really good in the past. And if you Google your question, latest tips for optimizing my LinkedIn profile, great. You'll get some really interesting articles. Some of them are very fancy and technical and designed for recruiters who are doing complex searches on the back end. But that can be helpful too, to see how are people searching, how are people using it. You can also try doing a Google search on best tips for LinkedIn profiles for graphic designers, or LinkedIn profiles for advertising, art department heads. Try field specific, industry specific, or job function specific. And sometimes your professional groups may have coaches that have written articles directly for you, which can be helpful too. And it's great that questions are coming in about LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is the basic, it's the basic social media platform that most all of us need to be on and need to be using. And the reason is it's your point of visibility on the web that you can control. And perhaps you have a personal website. As I said, some people in some fields will want to do that or need to do that, but it helps you be found. It helps you be visible in a professional way. And when you're using it more. It's great for research, finding other people, finding what other people are doing, um, but it also can help you be found and help opportunity find you. Um, when it's well written and tells your story in a clear way and has your skills highlighted. When you start looking at other people's profiles in your field, if you've already done that, you'll see not everybody is doing a great job at really showing their skills, their accomplishments, what they can do. Um, but that's more and more, even though I talk about the resume and the cover letter, and they are part of the job search etiquette, still more and more your job search and your professional and career building activity is going to be about visibility. And visibility doesn't mean you have to be on every social media platform. It means you need to be active and visible and helpful and interesting in whatever platforms your industry operates in, or the managers that you want to be known to, the peers you want to connect with. So for some people, many people, not all, it might include Twitter. And again, thoughtful, strategic Twitter. And you can find great articles, again, on jobhunt.org and other places on how to get started. It's not as intimidating if you haven't done it before or you've only used it personally. There's some basic strategies that you can find there about getting started with professional brand building and visibility on Twitter. For other fields, it's actually Instagram, interestingly, and Pinterest. But that, again, just check with folks in your field for what's necessary, what's appropriate, what's step one, LinkedIn for most of us, and then what are step two for visibility, for building relationships, and for, again, being a helpful, useful presence, which could be anything from posting an interesting article to answering other people's questions in a helpful way, connecting people to each other that you think could be useful or interesting or helpful to each other, giving people resources. Great. See if I had another question. I thought there was one up above. Let's see. No, not yet. Okay. Great, thoughtful questions. Thank you. Now, we're getting close to the end of our time. What I wanted to, I guess, talk about briefly in the time we have left is, again, there's some information about networking informational interviews in the PowerPoint, which is kind of a booklet more than a visual PowerPoint. There's more information about networking and informational interviews on our website, Tufts Career Services website, because, again, it's a great resource also just for learning about trends, about needs, about what direction your field or your industry might be heading, what the challenges might be, more broadly, and also then more specifically at that institution. And getting feedback about, especially if you're making a big career change, a big pivot, you're going to need a lot of those networking advice meetings to help you figure out what the resources are. Which of the professional associations would be the most useful ones for you to join? Of course, you want to check them out yourself and attend and visit, but it's great to get advice about that too, based on your goals. What else could you be doing? What else could you be reading? What events could you be attending? What other people should you be connecting with or meeting, right? And it's also covered in informational interviewing. Networking is covered well in books, and I recommend some in this at the end of the PowerPoint, but also in the follow-up email. Just to mention briefly about networking at meetings, you really need to, when you're like a professional meeting or a conference, professional association, you really need to be prepared. And beforehand, again, people tell me they felt like a meeting was a waste of time. That's often, sometimes it's the wrong meeting, that's true, and it wasn't useful or strategic for them. But more often it's that they didn't prepare to really think ahead of time about what they have to offer, what information, what resource they have to offer, and what are they looking to get? Not, well, I'm looking for a job in New York. Well, okay, what kinds of people and organizations are you looking to connect with in New York, right? How can you be specific about that? Because the odds of getting a specific job lead to exactly what you want at an in New York, at a meeting in Boston, or even a meeting in New York, they're not necessarily high. But getting a lead or an idea about a person, an introduction to a person, an idea about an organization or a resource, yeah, high likelihood. Also at meetings, you try to look for ways to help others, find out their agenda, prepare conversation starters. Those of us that are extroverts need to prepare so we don't sort of rely on the gift of gab, but lose track of the goal. And folks that are introverted can get good value out of events by preparing small talk, preparing questions to ask people so that they feel more confident, so that they feel better about being there and less shy about having these conversations. And the what do you do question, as I mentioned, really important to prepare your answer for that, for the conference or the meeting. Who do you help? What do you help them with? Something brief, but not just your job title, which doesn't usually tell people much. I'll let you read the rest of this on your own, just to mention what I call on this page the guerrilla marketing, GEU, not OR, guerrilla. There is a book by that title, Guerrilla Marketing for Job Hunters, and some of what they say is a bit outrageous or perhaps inappropriate for your industry or your sector. But other things that they say are really thought-provoking and interesting, and especially helping you think, what can I do to communicate or connect with the people I want to work for, in a proactive way, in a useful way? How can I give them information, ideas? So this is one idea that they talk about, where you write some sort of competitive analysis on some topic and just send it to managers you would like to work for with a little cover note explaining who you are, and you can say, that this is the, type of ideas that you'd love to bring to their team sometime if they have needs. Oh, here we go. A question asked in the chat. Do you have any tips for finding the correct... Oh, we've lost our audio. Let's see. It might be my end. Excuse me? Keep talking. Okay. So I see a question about tips for finding the correct hiring manager. It really depends. Sometimes, again, if you have, is it still? Oh, sometimes if you have any sort of inside contact in the organization, even if the person isn't in that exact department, sometimes they can do some sleuthing for you and figure that out. Other times you're looking for clues in, the language of the job ad. You look for clues. If it's a small enough organization, you may find clues right on the website. Sometimes Google can actually help, where you go, Director of Engineering for blah, blah department for blah, blah company, and you put in the city and state, and you put that into Google, and sometimes you'll get something from a public announcement, a news release, or some other event that they've been part of that was on the web. Other times, again, really thoughtfully searching on LinkedIn, advanced people search, where you double click on the search bar at the top on LinkedIn, the white or gray search bar, and you double click on it, it opens up all these filters, and that's in regular LinkedIn. You don't need to have premium. And you click on the all filters, and then you can put in job titles, what you think the job title is of the manager if you know it, or you can put it in as keywords. and then the name of the company. So sometimes you can't be sure and you're taking your best guess. But again, if you're applying online, um, and then you're for an advertised job, and then you're trying to follow up with the right person, you sometimes people, if it's a really large, opaque organization, you go for a recruiter and connect with the recruiter on LinkedIn, the internal recruiter, and ask them, are you connected with the such and such role? I'm really interested, right? Are you? So you're right. Sometimes you're being a detective using everything from humans to online sleuthing to LinkedIn research. Good question. Thank you. Let's see. And I will stay on the line. We're after 2:15, but I'll stay on the line just as I know we have a few people still with us, which is great. And again, feel free to ask a question if something else occurs to you, or if you have a comment to make, that's fine too. So my final job search tips is use all the job search methods that are appropriate for you. So check out recruiters, outside recruiters, headhunters. Sometimes new grads are sought after by recruiters if they have skills that are in demand and the employers are willing to pay. Others of us, liberal arts grads, the recruiters, if we're new grads, will not be so interested. But again, don't assume. Check it out. And get support. The job search really will be the hardest job you ever do, not including being a parent or step parent, but in the working world, it's really tough, especially if it's a full-time search. And take some risks. Step outside of that comfort zone. If you've never joined a committee in a professional association, try it out. If you've never helped plan a conference, again, that's my fave. You don't have to be the expert, right? You can be a set of hands to do some research to help them identify a vendor, to go look at the conference site and evaluate it for the needs. There'll always, especially in a well-run professional association, there will be some volunteers or even paid staff people who do have expertise in different aspects of planning the conference, but they need people to help and to help execute. So even if you don't have expertise, try it out. Highly recommended because you build relationships over time. And that's the nicest way to network, right? When you're getting to know people over time and they see your competence and your credibility. Oh, another tip, keep that job search activity up and going until you start work. This is hard to do. Is it many of us, even me in the past, the deep dark past, are guilty of doing basically one kind of linear, kind of serial, like serial monogamy. You date one company and it's going really well and it's really exciting, so you stop applying for anything else because they want to interview you. And then, oh, they really are nice, and at the interview they act like they really want you. So why bother applying for anything else? Well, we've all had times, many of us, when we've done that, and it's a big mistake because then if something doesn't work out with that employer, which honestly they could love you and decide, you know what, we don't have the funding right now, we're not going to hire anybody, or gee, you're terrific, but there was an internal candidate. We loved you, but position's on hold for 6 months. Right? All kinds of things can happen, even if you are a great match. Or you could be a great match and they decide to hire a Granny Smith instead of a Red Delicious, right? Both apples, both getting the job done. Nothing you could do to become a Granny Smith. So really another of my tips to prevent you from making the mistakes that I've made and that some of my clients have made is you keep applying for things. You keep networking while you're under consideration for that one or hope perhaps two opportunities, whatever because that way you have some momentum. If something goes wrong or slows down, right? Maybe they're just taking weeks, and I've heard of some employers who end up hiring somebody, but the whole process of the interviews takes 3 or 4 months. It's rare, but it does happen. And during that 3 or 4 months, you do not want to lose your momentum and be sitting around counting on it. When I was very young, I once did that. They literally were saying, don't worry, you're the one we want. It's just waiting for the mayor's signature. It was a city job. Well, now that's my code word. Anytime something is waiting for the mayor's signature, the mayor is highly likely to have a perhaps deadbeat brother-in-law or somebody that they owe a favor to who might get hired for that job, which in this they kind of sheepishly admitted to me 6 weeks later while I was sitting by the phone, literally, and not job searching. Like I said, I was young, and the mayor had to hire somebody else that he knew, and they were very apologetic. But I was left with no momentum. So don't do that. Don't be like me. Keep your momentum. Keep your activity going. And those no search activities, the ones where you're connecting, volunteering, being available and visible in your profession at professional meetings, perhaps writing and speaking, or getting other people to write and speak that you facilitate or interview, all of those things help you be visible and seen as a credible and interesting and professional person, and will help make the next search so much easier. And you're more likely to have opportunities come to you. So it won't take as much sweat or work to develop and nurture that network, to learn about the challenges and issues and needs um, in your target area. So we talked about, the Tufts website with jobs for art sciences and engineering. It's called Handshake. You'll find it on our website. Business cards. I didn't mention that, but a quick tip, it's great to have if your job doesn't provide you with business cards or it isn't appropriate to use them for your search. You make personal cards. Vistaprint is one very inexpensive professional resource. Moo.com, I absolutely love. They're more expensive, but they are gorgeous. And you can customize the look and feel of the card, matte or shiny. You can pick their beautiful designs, or you can use your own design and they will print it for you. Um, Again, they're both very professional and appropriate. I just love the colorfulness and creativity of the Moo ones. Make Your Contacts Count is my favorite networking book in general. Like, not a lot of focus on job search. The job search one is a foot in the door, networking your way into the hidden job market. The guerrilla marketing for job hunters, I mentioned, that's the one with the ideas that range from the questionable extreme to interesting, depending on your perspective and your industry. But it's really great for kind of shaking up your thinking, helping you be really thinking about how can I get in front of and connected to the managers that I want to support and work for, and how can I do that in an authentic way and in a helpful way. And Kate Wendelton, I just love, but she's, as one of my listeners once said, but she doesn't have, I've looked at it online on Amazon while you were talking, and it has nothing in it on online or LinkedIn or social media. So that's why I say she's a pre-social media classic. But a lot of elements of the job search are how to communicate effectively with a human being that has problems and challenges, right? And that has not changed. Some of the mediums and methods for the communicating have changed, but that core piece of understanding or learning about their needs and then communicating is right on. And the Muse, I haven't mentioned, it's a website where you'll see if you read it, a lot of the resources and articles are kind of pitched toward recent grads or millennials. But most of the information is really solid and well written and well done. The only article I've ever seen on it that I disagreed with was one that recommended negotiating your salary by email, which I don't agree with, and many others do not agree with. Again, their strategic points were useful. I just don't think you want to do it in email. You want to do it talking to people so you can pick up on the cues and build that relationship and rapport. So good luck with your next steps in your job searches. Oh, I see another question has come in. Let's see. It says, transitioning from running your own company to finding a job working for someone else's company. Okay, that is a longer answer too, but the short answer is again, you need to pitch to what the needs are. And if you've been doing your own company for a long time, say 10, 15 plus years, you'll also need to help build trust that they believe, help them believe that you can be managed, and help them believe that you can fit into a company culture that's not you creating it or you running it. So there'll be issues, they may believe that you are not going to want to be managed or that you won't want to work toward their agenda, but possibly there'll be a really good fit if there's a sort of entrepreneurial aspect to the job where they need someone who can really create opportunity and create results in their sector. But that's the short answer is, work with, really look at, and if you're use your networking meetings, your professional association activity to really be learning and honing in on what are the pressing needs, the pressing challenges, where can your expertise and experience really show them solutions? Can you put not all your cards, but at least some sort of hints or solution ideas right in your cover letter? Can you be bringing solutions and ideas in meetings that you have with people? Again, not to give it all away for free, but to show them that you're not saying, well, I've done A, B, C, and D, but to say, oh, I understand you may have been working on X and Y or have a challenge of Z, right? And then, so that's the quick answer, but it really is would need to be kind of more customized to your situation. But it is true that there can be a barrier of them believing that you won't fit culturally or won't want to be managed. So you can overcome that with how you communicate with them, and also with really bringing the solution, bringing the answers. So again, thank you. We are at the end of our time. Thank you for your time, for your attention, for your thoughtful questions. And I will send a follow-up email with some additional resources and ideas and links. And good luck with trying some new things and refining the old things. Bye-bye.